who shouldn't have to go against biological men.
Let's discuss. There's a conversation that's gotten extremely heated in the WNBA and across social media. Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham recently spoke publicly about transgender athletes competing in women's sports. She said she wants to protect young girls and women in sports and argued that biological males shouldn't compete against female athletes. Cunningham has continued to stand by those comments, saying she believes she can extend love to people while also speaking what she believes is truth. And now the conversation has become much bigger than basketball. People are asking, what makes someone a woman? What does female actually mean? Can Christians talk about biological sex without hating transgender people? And most importantly, what does the Bible say?
Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham is known for her moves on the court. But on the sidelines, it's her recent comments on transgender athletes causing controversy. In an article published earlier this month, Cunningham told ESPN, quote, "I want to protect young girls in the locker room or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men." That statement brought critics and supporters to Indiana's matchup against Seattle Tuesday, including two teenage fans who wore t-shirts depicting the XX and XY chromosomes and carried signs thanking Cunningham courtside.
I wasn't trying to be political, I was just trying to support Sophie.
That's when they say a woman, later identified as Seattle Storm co-owner Celeste Keaton, approached them.
I thought she was going to be nice, and then she started screaming at us and cussing at us, and then she told us that we were effing insane.
Keaton is now facing a fine and a 5-game suspension from the WNBA for that interaction. The Seattle Storm apologized for the exchange and said they remain committed to creating a welcoming and respectful environment for anyone who attends a Storm game.
The topic of trans athletes in sports has become part of this larger picture of just how divisive it is in the political realm.
Reporter Madeline Kenny covers women's sports for the New York Post.
Sports really reflects society, and those conversations are happening, and then it's starting to infiltrate sports. And when you have athletes like Sophie Cunningham who are outspoken and take a certain stance, and people really cling on to that, it just created an environment where we saw what happened in Seattle.
Let's start with something important. The Bible doesn't specifically talk about the WNBA, transgender athletes, or modern sports eligibility policies. So, we shouldn't pretend there's a Bible verse that says, here's exactly how the WNBA should write its rulebook. But Scripture does give us a framework for understanding human beings, sex, identity, dignity, and how we treat one another. And that's where this conversation gets interesting. Genesis 1 verse 27 says, "So God created man in his own image. Male and female, he created them." From the beginning, Scripture presents humanity as male and female. That means biological sex isn't presented in the Bible as an accidental or meaningless characteristic. It's part of God's created order. And that's important because our culture is having a major debate about whether being male or female is primarily a biological reality, a social identity, or something that can be changed. From a biblical worldview, the starting point isn't society. It's the Creator. God gets to define His creation. But here's where Christians have to be careful. Believing that God created humanity, male and female, does not give Christians permission to treat people without dignity. Genesis 1 verse 27 says, "We're created in the image of God." And that means every human being has dignity, including people we disagree with, including transgender people, and including people who don't share our Christian beliefs. So, a Christian can believe that biological sex matters while also refusing to mock, bully, dehumanize, or hate someone. Those aren't contradictions. That's called Christian conduct. Jesus said in Matthew 22, verse 39, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself," and your neighbor doesn't have to agree with you for you to love them. Now, let's bring this back to sports. One reason this conversation is so intense is because women's sports were created around sex-based competition. There are physical differences between male and female bodies that can matter in athletic competition. That's why sports have traditionally separated competitions by sex. And this is where the conversation about fairness becomes complicated. You have women who have spent years training, competing, sacrificing, and building their athletic careers. So it's reasonable to ask, how do we protect fairness in women's sports? That's not automatically a hateful question. At the same time, Christians should be careful about turning a policy debate into an attack on an entire group of people. Because there's a difference between saying, I believe this sports policy is unfair, and saying, those people don't deserve dignity. Those are completely different statements. And there's something else Christians need to remember. Our identity cannot ultimately come from sports. It can't come from our gender. It can't come from our political party. It can't come from our sexuality. It can't come from whether we're popular or unpopular. Our deepest identity comes from God. Psalm 139 says that God knows us intimately and that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. So, when Christians talk about identity, we shouldn't just be talking about what we're against. We should be talking about what we're for. We're for truth. We're for human dignity. We're for protecting children. We're for fairness. We're for compassion. We're for holiness. And ultimately, we're for people knowing Jesus Christ. Now, here's where I think the church needs some wisdom. We cannot allow this issue to become another political battlefield where Christians just repeat whatever their favorite political commentator says. And we also can't allow fear of being called hateful to prevent us from speaking honestly about what Scripture teaches. Jesus was full of grace and truth. John 1 verse 14 describes him that way. Not grace without truth, and not truth without grace. Grace and truth. That's the balance. So when it comes to the WNBA and Sophie Cunningham's comments, I think Christians should be able to have a serious conversation. We can discuss biological sex. We can discuss fairness in women's sports. We can discuss transgender identity. We can discuss how children should be protected. We can disagree about politics, but we should never forget that we're talking about real human beings. People who have feelings, people who have families, people who are made in God's image. And here's the biggest question for Christians. Are we trying to win a culture war, or are we trying to represent Christ? Because you can win an argument and lose the opportunity to show someone the love of Jesus. The goal isn't to be the loudest person online. The goal is to be faithful. So yes, Christians should stand on biblical truth, but we should stand on that truth with humility, with compassion, with courage, and with love. Because biblical truth doesn't require us to hate people, and biblical love doesn't require us to abandon truth. Jesus gives us both. And maybe that's the conversation the culture needs most right now.